Well, let me just interject here. Okay. Andrew, have you seen kind of monolithic support from the aviation trade press on this issue? Or, I mean, is there some discussion going on there?
No, I think there's some discussion going on that, you know, there's some who think, like Pete said, that it needs to be accelerated. And I think the best thing we can do as an industry and as the coalition is continue to say that we have to find a viable alternative. And viable means many things, from distribution to cost to technically feasible in the aircraft. And we can't forget about all of the airplanes that are flying today. It can't just be a drop into new airplanes. It has to be something that works for all airplanes. So yeah, there is some push that, you know, we've all been, you know, laying on the back of our heels, which is not true whatsoever. We as an industry have all been working on this, and just like user fees over the last few years, and just like user fees over the next few years, and this issue, we are going to work arm in arm, because I want to quote Ed, because he says this a lot: together we stand, divided we fall. We truly are locking elbows in this and working together to find a solution, and we have devoted a ton of time to this.
Does the fact that you know, unlike if you buy a Boeing, you're probably going to have 3 engine choices that you can put on the airplane. There's a lot of competition. You know, in general aviation, we don't have that. You know, you've got the people that have Lycomings in the aircraft, and you've got the people that have Continentals in their aircraft, and the cost of certifying a second engine alternative. Does the lack of competition on general aviation aircraft, is that hurting our ability to get the engine makers on board to help us along with this?
Well, I think that you've got competition out there if you look at diesels as an alternative. There's some other technology that we were hoping would be successful out of Switzerland that dealt with a rotary type of engine. But, you know, you look at the marketplace and you look at having 2 major engine manufacturers, both that have been building tremendous engines to be able to perform to a known quantity of this leaded fuel that has been out there for so long, to a spec that it's interesting when you go and you buy avgas throughout the country and you go and you test it, the variance is tremendous. And a lot of times the oil companies will just throw in extra lead in there to protect themselves, because it's better to have more than to have less. Because if you come in less than the spec and all of a sudden the engine starts to detonate, pre-detonation, if you remember knocks in your engine when we converted to unleaded fuel in cars and everything, you'd hear knocking a lot, same type of thing. That's pre-detonation. The oil companies go and throw in that extra amount of lead to protect themselves. So the engine manufacturers right now don't want to see themselves holding the bag. If we go ahead and don't get this right and don't make sure that whatever fuel we go to works across the entire fleet, then they start and sit and look at the liability issues that they will incur, because there are just 2 of them out there. That could be just as devastating to the whole industry as anything else that could happen.
Well, let me ask the 3 of you, you know, Rod and Pete and Andrew, what do you think the timeline is on getting a drop-in fuel? I mean, is it 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or another 20 years?
I don't think it would be smart to pick a timeline right now. I mean, I think...
That doesn't bode well, does it? Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be short-term. I think it's a long-term issue. You know, there's no silver bullet out there right now. So, but there's also... One of the other keys is we have worked with the EPA, we have worked with the FAA to ensure that leaded fuel will be around until this replacement is found. So as of right now, it's not smart to put a timeline, because there's so many kind of off-ramps or gates that we have to go through in the process with the Research Council as well as ASTM to look at all the different fuels, test them in engines, and go that route. There's a lot of work going on that, but it's just not smart to put a timeline on it.
But, you know, we're the last holdouts with leaded fuel. Does this mean that, you know, we're going to get to the point where the general public is going to go enough is enough and just basically shut down our supply of leaded fuel? Or is this something where the general aviation community can demonstrate that there's incremental progress being made, and by a certain date, it looks like we're going to have a solution to the problem? You know, Pete, you've been a big proponent of, you know, ultra-low lead fuel. where are we with that?
Actually, we got the testing results in. We have buy-in from the refiners and the oil companies to actually drop the lead content down to the minimum specification. As I mentioned before, a lot of times they'll throw in extra lead, and they've worked, and we're very proud of the fact that the oil companies have been willing to work with us, dropped it down. It'll give us about a 20% reduction. Is 20% enough? Well, as states go out and try to be able to achieve their programs where they're going to have to actually test air quality around lead emitters, which means airports, we'll be able to go and get some quantitative data as to what kind of effects that we actually have as you spread out from the airport. But I think that there isn't a person that I know of in this industry that isn't committed to the fact that we ultimately need to get to an unleaded solution. But we just have to be able to do it through a process that's going to make sure that we test the fuel adequately, that everyone that currently needs it today is using it. Now, on the light end of general aviation, the other issue that we've got is there's a lot of groups that are saying, well, why can't you guys just force the government to produce regular auto fuel that doesn't have ethanol in it? And we're good, but the farm lobby is bigger than we are by factors of, I don't know, 100, whatever. And when, notice that most states went from 10% ethanol to 15% ethanol. Ethanol is not good for airplanes. It's not good for boats either. But when we have that issue out there, it's a very, very formidable task for us to be able to go and try to get anybody, to convince anybody to say, don't put ethanol in auto fuel so that we can use it in aircraft. Our market is just so small.
Let's assume for the moment then that we can solve the leaded fuel problem in the future. That doesn't really relieve us of our other major problem, and that's carbon emissions and carbon dioxide. Ed, we've certainly gotten a lot of heat from Europe in terms of making all business aircraft operators crossing the pond accountable for carbon emissions. Where are we with that? I mean, the last time I talked with Brian, it seemed to me, Humphreys of European Business Aircraft Association, it seemed to me that we're getting a little bit of movement on that. Where are we with that now?
Well, the European trading scheme is, in a lot of ways, simply wrong-headed. It is an environmental envelope, but at its heart, it's a tax issue for the European government systems, and it really doesn't promote the kind of activity that a lot of people are talking about. But I think it is illustrative to us in the sense that the focus on the environment that is clearly present in every aspect of European life is a fundamental part of the dialogue and the debate today. What we saw in this Congress is that the House of Representatives did pass cap-and-trade legislation. The U.S. Senate debated it, and it's something that I think is a growing issue as the federal government moves forward. Despite some of the changes that took place in the last election, I think the reality is carbon emissions are something that our community is going to be dealing with.